Tom Jordan and Kevin Deitz are all talk. 760 WJR.
The first retirement of the 2024 political cycle. It's a big one, and it puts Michigan deeper into the battleground state category. U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow, she announced yesterday she is not going to seek another term in the U.S. Senate after she first took office back in 2001. It'll be 24 years for her when the term is up in 2025. And already, Kevin, there are a number of names being bandied about of who could take that important seat.
Yeah, Tom, Debbie Stabenow announcing her retirement. It's a nice story. She spent a lot of time in public service. She rose to one of the highest offices in the land, and that's a newsworthy story. But just behind that headline is the real story, and that is this all-out scramble to try and replace her. The Senate is razor thin in favor of the Democrats. The Democrats do not want to lose this seat, and the Republicans desperately want to win it. We talked to John James this morning. He's not even been sworn in as a new Republican House member. He's already being suggested as a Stabenow replacement. He's not even sworn in to the House yet. The Democrats, they're thinking Debbie Dingell or Alyssa Slotkin, but what about Pete Buttigieg? He now lives in Michigan. He's a Michigan resident. He says he doesn't want the job. We'll have to see how that goes. I think Governor Whitmer has also said she doesn't want the job. But this race is on. So start reaching out to political donors. Get that dark money moving around. Michigan is a swing state, and this is going to be, mark my words, the most expensive political Senate race probably in the history of the world, but definitely in 2024. You watch. I'm going to remind you of that in 2 years from now. Joining us now is Dave Dulio, Director of the Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science Professor at Oakland University. Good morning, Dave. Happy New Year.
Good morning, guys. Happy New Year. Thanks for having me.
Am I being too dramatic, or could I be onto something? Is this going to be a massive spending spree for this seat in Michigan?
I think you nailed it, Kevin. This is going to be an epic battle between whoever emerges from the primaries, and that doesn't even consider the wide open primary. I think that we're going to see play out over the next year and a half. Right? I mean, it starts now. We've seen, as you mentioned, John James has been asked about it. Not even being a full-fledged member of the House of Representatives, we've seen some folks come out and say no already very clearly, including Congressman Kildee, as well as Candace Miller on the Republican side. Right, so I think the jockeying has started, and because it's going to be such an expensive race, because these folks are going to have to raise $30, $40, $50 million by the time it's over. People got to start now, which is just crazy to think, but it's just a reality.
Yeah, Michigan feels like a Democratic state. The governor's a Democrat, Secretary of State, the Attorney General, the House, the Senate, the Supreme Court. It feels like we're a blue state, but are we really? Because these elections all have been fairly close, and we have gone back and forth. Are we a purple state? Are we in play for Republicans?
Absolutely, Michigan is in play for Republicans, and it's why you see such attention paid to Michigan every election cycle. Yes, Governor Whitmer, Dana Nessel, Jocelyn Benson, they all won their races in 2022 by significant margins. But in my view, that's in large part due to the candidates who were running against them, as well as some other dynamics that were at play. But if we look at the state as a whole, it's competitive, right? And the for instance, the aggregate votes for state house and state senate in 2022 were almost 50-50. And so the right Republican with the right message statewide can absolutely win in Michigan.
Yeah, that's going to be key, is the right Republican. In the last two Senate races, they were very close, but it was John James in both of those. First against Stabenow in 2018. He lost by about 7 points. Then he lost to Gary Peters in 2020 by just over a point. But that's pretty telling, I think, as to how politically split we are in Michigan. Could I don't know, maybe it's not John James, but maybe it's someone else, like a Tudor Dixon type of Republican. Could someone like that beat out a potential Jocelyn Benson or a Dana Nessel, or maybe it is a Pete Buttigieg?
I think it before we can handicap this thing, we have to know who the combatants are, right? Because I think the who on the Republican side could beat the Democratic candidate matters as much about the Democrat as it does about the Republican, right? I mean, if it's Dana Nessel as a nominee, that's a very different circumstance than if Garland Gilchrist is the Democratic nominee, which is very different than if, say, Alyssa Slotkin is the Democratic nominee, right? I mean, it really is it's going to be a fascinating dynamic to watch over the next year and a half to see who emerges, and then the battle's on in August of 2024.
Yeah, and money's going to be a key factor in this, and maybe a Peter Meyer is the guy for that aspect of it. But in totality, when you look at the entirety of the country in the next Senate race in 2024, the Democrats, they've got to defend 23 seats in 2024. The GOP only has 10 that are going to be in play, and that already puts the Democrats at a disadvantage. So looking at the current Democratic senators who might also consider a retirement or maybe vulnerable, I know John Tester in Montana, a very red state, maybe Joe Manchin in West Virginia. How do you foresee this happening nationwide in 2024? Is this a good opportunity for the GOP to take over the Senate?
Absolutely. Although we thought the same thing prior to 2022, right? And Republicans wasted a golden opportunity, I think, to make gains in the U.S. Senate as well as the U.S. House, which I think we're seeing the results of that play out in this crazy speaker battle we've got going. But the Democrats' eyes have always been toward 2024 with some concern because of all the turf that they have to defend. And I Michigan and the Stabenow seat was one that not all Democrats were counting on having to maybe put as so many resources behind as they may have to, depending on the GOP nominee, right? And this might be a seat that the Democrats really have to fight for to hold on to, which of course means that any resources spent here are resources that can't be spent in other races that they want to play in, and it just is another it's another opportunity for Republicans to add to their numbers.
Donald Trump said something that caught my attention. He said Republicans made a mistake in the midterms by refusing to give at all on the abortion issue. He says the abortion issue doomed Republicans in the midterms. Will that issue or some other issue be the decider in who is elected in Michigan? Are we that close between Republicans and Democrats that it's actually could be an issue?
Oh, sure. I think that, that we've seen that play out several times in the last handful of elections, right? The different issues are prioritized more by more voters at different times, right? And it's a wait and see at this point as to what that issue might be. There's as we said, right, year and a half between now and the primary, and a few more months to the general. And as you guys both know, that's akin to multiple lifetimes in politics. There's so much time. The real work in the first phase of this battle to replace Senator Stabenow is really going to be behind the scenes, raising money, planning a campaign organization, building it up, and vying for support. And I think a dark horse thing to watch on this is who becomes chair of the Michigan Republican Party, and whether or not that person has an effect or influences who runs and then eventually who wins that Republican nomination.
Yeah, that's coming up very, very quickly. Well, we always appreciate your perspective. Dave Dulio, the director of the Center for Civic Engagement and Political Science professor at Oakland University. Dave, great to talk with you. Thanks.
Good talking to you. Thanks, guys.
All right, have a good one. Your call is next, 800-859-0W.